The shocking secret of North Korea, the real purpose behind their disturbing actions. When the Russian army realized that it could not continue the war in Ukraine for long under the difficult circumstances, it decided to make a strong ally. Initially, at the beginning of the war, Belarus was supporting Russia. However, the war progressed beyond Belarus' support and escalated. In this situation, Russia turned to North Korea, which had the closest characteristics since the invasion. Kim Jong-un and Putin have deepened their partnership against the Western global order, with Kim pledging full support for Putin's struggle. According to US, Ukrainian, and South Korean officials, Moscow first turned to Pyongyang for the weapons it urgently needed. And now Kim is sending his own citizens to war. This is a highly unusual move for a country that is rarely involved in foreign wars. Both Russia and North Korea have indirectly acknowledged the presence of troops. Last week, North Korea's deputy foreign minister stated that this would be an action in accordance with international law. President Putin last week referred to the Russia-North Korea defense agreement signed in June. Under this agreement, if one country is subjected to armed occupation, the other country will provide military and other assistance by all means at its disposal. The agreement was quickly ratified by the Russian parliament last week. Now, the two states appear to be putting it into practice. Russia hopes to turn the tide with support from North Korea. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin stated that North Korean troops deployed to Russia have begun moving towards the Ukrainian border, and it would be very disturbing to send troops to war. Around 10,000 North Korean troops are being trained in Russia, and some have been deployed in the war against Ukraine. This is an unprecedented step by Pyongyang to endanger its people in a conflict zone far from the Korean peninsula. Austin mentioned after a meeting with his South Korean counterpart that some of these troops have started to move towards the Ukrainian border in the KSK region. It is not yet clear whether they will be used in combat. But if they are, it is indeed very disturbing. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appears to have sent some of his best troops to assist Russian President Vladimir Putin's war effort, including the elite Storm Corps unit that has long been training to infiltrate the south. According to South Korean intelligence officials, the deployment of North Korean forces is the latest sign of deepening military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow as they join forces against the West. So, how many troops is North Korea sending to Russia? And where are they going? The Pentagon has stated that up to 10,000 North Korean soldiers have been sent to eastern Russia for military training, possibly to bolster Putin's forces. Ukrainian and South Korean officials have provided higher estimates, ranging from 12,000 to 19,000. NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte stated that North Korean troops were deployed to the Russian border region of Khe, where Ukrainian forces seized territory in a surprise offensive during the summer. Kim Yulu, a senior security expert at the Korea Institute for Military Affairs in Seoul, indicated that engineering and reserve troops and other personnel assisting with logistics, ammunition support, and transportation were likely sent to Russia to support the elite troops. Special forces are likely to be the primary troops there. Kim made a statement to this effect. But if tens of thousands are being sent, there must be many more troops accompanying the Storm Corps to provide them with food, shelter, ammunition, communications, etc. Kim noted that despite the specialties of the Special Forces troops, they are likely to assist in combat missions because they have been trained and have learned how Russians fight and communicate. A former Kremlin official, still close to government circles, stated that North Korea's deployment to KSK was an act of revenge after what the Kremlin perceived as an escalation in KSK and a decision by Kiev's Western allies to allow some attacks inside Russia. The former official, who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive issues freely, claimed it was cheaper and politically simpler for the Kremlin to deploy North Korean forces. The official expressed the belief that North Korea was receiving much-needed money for the deployment, as well as military experience and battlefield skills for the troops. The South Korean spy agency stated last week that Russia is expected to pay each North Korean soldier about $2,000 each month. This is a substantial sum by North Korean standards. Andrei Lova, a leading scholar on North Korea-Russia relations, wrote on the specialized website NK News that the lowest monthly salary of a Russian private in the conflict zone is $2,500. South Korea's intelligence agency reported earlier this month that the first group of 1.500 fighters traveled to Russia and were equipped with Russian military uniforms, Russian-made weapons, and forged documents. These fighters were located in areas of Siberia, and more soldiers are expected to travel soon. According to the agency, while Washington stated that the North Koreans would be legitimate military targets, U.S. envoy to the UN Robert Wood remarked that if North Korean troops enter Ukraine in support of Russia, they will certainly return in body bags. Soldiers, of course, are not Russia's only interest in North Korea. Russia also intends to utilize North Korea's warplanes. How will Russia utilize North Korean warplanes? At this point in the war, there are several clear advantages to having North Korean troops join Russia's ranks. North Korean troops would provide immediate support to Russia by increasing Russian manpower on the front lines. According to Andrew Yeo, a senior fellow at the Washington-based Brookings Institution Center for Asian Policy Studies, more than 2.5 years after the start of a grueling war, both Kiev and Moscow are looking for ways to replenish their weary ranks while avoiding unwanted moves such as a wave of mobilizations or adjusting the draft age to younger soldiers. The head of Kiev's National Security Council, Alexander Litvinenko, informed Ukrainian lawmakers earlier this week that Ukraine would recruit an additional 160,000 men into the army. Russia, in particular, has relied heavily on so-called meat grinder attacks in Ukraine, utilizing infantry-led assaults to overwhelm defenses and rack up very high casualty numbers. Throughout this year, it has made slow but steady gains in war-torn eastern Ukraine. Recently, Russia claimed to have captured Kov, a town in the eastern Donetsk region, as it approached Pokrovsk, a key logistics hub for Kiev. Since February 2022, Russia has inflicted nearly 700,000 casualties according to Ukrainian figures, while Western estimates put the number of dead and wounded in Moscow at around 610,000. September was the bloodiest month so far. A senior Estonian intelligence official stated in late October that Russian casualties could reach 40,000 a month. US figures show that Moscow can attract about 30,000 new troops each month, while the current number of North Korean troops makes up a very small percentage of Russian forces in Ukraine. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a US-based think tank, Ramon Parcho Porro, a professor of international relations at King's College London, noted that it could free up Russian troops to lead the offensive and counter-offensive that Russia is focused on. Parcho Porro remarked that fighters from North Korea's highly militarized society, with its large army and regular training exercises, would likely be instrumental in supporting Russian operations, despite their lack of knowledge of Russia's territory and weapon stockpiles. He argued that they would probably not need extensive training in the weapons, rifles, mortars, and other explosives Russia uses against Ukraine, as these could be useful in removing Ukrainian troops from the KSK region. Yeo added that Kiev's sudden incursion into the KSK region bordering Russia nearly 3 months ago took Russia and many international observers by surprise. Moscow has still not managed to regain control of the area it knows as the Ukrainian Bulge. But in the past few weeks, it has retaken some of the territory Ukraine seized in the summer. One school of thought suggests that Ukraine's KSK offensive has indeed demonstrated the need to deploy North Korean troops to push Ukrainian soldiers back to the border. Kiev's military intelligence service reported the previous day that it had detected North Korean troops in KSK for the first time. At least some of the thousands of fighters are thought to be members of the Storm Troops or Pyeongchang Special Operations Forces trained for infiltration and assassination. South Korean officials estimate that there are about 200,000 members of Pyeongchang Special Forces. According to the KSIS think tank, Yeo stated that these troops certainly have better combat training than Russian soldiers with little or no military experience. But it remains unclear whether Kim Jong-un will send a contingent of elite troops based on what other militaries have done. These deployed troops will be well trained and equipped because they have an immediate real-world mission, not an on-call mission. KSIS noted that many of the North Korean military defectors work in non-military jobs such as farming and construction without intensive combat training. Ji-hun Park, a North Korean defector now serving as a senior fellow in human security at the Asia-Pacific Strategy Center, stated that most of these individuals have not received highly intensive combat training. Given this, The North Korean troops deployed to Ukraine are unlikely to be exclusively elite forces. While some soldiers may be tasked with psychological warfare operations, most are likely to fill the gaps left by Russian forces and act as expendable cannon fodder. If these troops are sent into direct combat and suffer heavy casualties, it will lead to a large-scale massacre. Yo added that the North Korean leader may be less inclined to send more elite fighters if the casualty rate is close to that of Russian troops. So, what's in it for Pyongyang? For North Korea, these fighters gain combat experience that they have not had on a large scale in decades since the Korean War ended in an armistice in 1953. North Korea can use its personnel to test weapons in combat conditions and determine how to adjust its equipment. Pyongyang has supplied Moscow with a significant number of missiles and millions of rounds of ammunition. Kiev's military intelligence chief has previously stated that its support makes North Korea the most formidable Russian ally. Ukraine has persistently targeted ammunition depots storing North Korean munitions in recent months. Yo mentioned that there could be challenges in communication and smooth cooperation with Russian forces due to their different societal backgrounds. He continued that although North Korean troops are training at Russian military facilities in the Far East, differences in language, culture, training, and combat doctrine could reduce the effectiveness of North Korean forces until they are better integrated with Russian troops. Footage posted online by Russian and Ukrainian sources showed North Korean soldiers at a Russian training ground in the far eastern Primorsky region bordering North Korean territory. Citing an analysis of the video, Yo noted that this variation may not translate effectively into practical resilience in active combat scenarios like those currently seen in Ukraine, where they would face a modern and highly capable opposition in unfamiliar territory. Yo added that North Korean troops could also face morale issues if they approach the casualty figures suffered by Russian forces. Pyongyang could also encounter desertion and defection problems. Yo indicated that a Ukrainian government-sponsored hotline for Russian soldiers willing to defect to North Korean Special Operations Forces would be an embarrassing blow to the Kim regime. In addition to all these discussions, it is intriguing to consider who will serve in the North Korean army. Let's take a closer look at this. North Korea's army. The Korean People's Army, KPA, was established in 1948 with the support of the then Soviet Union to defend the new regime of Kim Il-sung, the founder of the new state, and to support his efforts to dominate the Korean peninsula by force. KPA service requirements dictate that soldiers must be at least 4 feet 10 inches, 148 centimeters tall and weigh 95 pounds, 43 kilograms, to be eligible to serve. North Korean men are conscripted, usually beginning service at age 17 and serving 8 to 10 years. Some women also serve, usually for 5 years. The South Korean spy agency informed lawmakers that most of the soldiers sent to Russia are in their early 20s, while some are teenagers. Only the most elite North Koreans sent to Russia are members of the Special Operations Forces of North Korea's elite 11th Army Corps, also known as the Storm Corps. According to a 2021 Defense Intelligence Agency report on North Korea's military power, North Korea's special operations units are trained with the best equipment, including explosives, chemical and biological agents, parachutes, and aircraft. However, this is quite primitive compared to other countries' special forces units. The report highlights various special forces units involved in some of North Korea's most notorious military operations over the last few decades, including the 1968 attack on Seoul, which resulted in deaths on both sides. These special forces are so highly valued in North Korea that they are featured in state media, often portrayed as the most powerful soldiers. North Korean defector and human rights defender Han Lee stated that although they are among the North's best trained troops, these soldiers will face challenges in adapting to modern warfare. In light of all this, an important development has occurred as North Korean troops prepare to join Russian forces against Ukraine. Kiev is intensifying its psychological warfare campaign to target North Korean soldiers. A senior Ukrainian official indicated that this effort is likely to be supported by a team of South Korean military observers. South Korea's defense minister, Kim Jong-un, stated that they will travel to Ukraine to monitor and analyze North Korean troops on the battlefield. Under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Kovalenko continued that the North Koreans will receive modern combat training and then will be used in real conflicts. We are actively involved in identifying their arrivals and the units they join. And we are also gathering evidence of their presence in Russia. their possible participation in hostilities against the Ukrainian army, and their presence in temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Ukraine has been conducting similar operations. Colonel David Maxwell, who served in the Combined Forces Command of the US and South Korea, stated that this could be a great opportunity to learn how to apply psychological tactics against North Korean forces in wartime. US Special Forces Colonel Maxwell further elaborated that bombings and gunfire do not occur 24/7. Military operations are characterized by periods of boredom and inactivity, with soldiers waiting for something to happen. This is when loudspeakers and leaflets can be very effective. Chan Boom, a senior research fellow at the Staten Korea National Unification Institute, suggested that psychological warfare could pose a real threat to the North Korean military. Yohan Bum added that in the case of North Korean soldiers, they are now mobilized for a war without any justification, and they are unlikely to have a strong will or high morale. As we have observed, South Korea's role in the ongoing process has increased considerably. Especially regarding North Korea, they do not understand North Korean culture as we do. We can provide more social indirect support rather than military or operational support. We emphasized that to achieve the desired political and operational impact of psychological warfare, it is crucial for the South Korean team to integrate well with Ukrainian forces through their supportive roles. However, other experts are not convinced that psychological warfare will effectively persuade North Korean troops to surrender. Robert Rapson continued that if the R decides to deploy technical personnel to Ukraine solely to monitor and advise the Ukrainian military on matters related to the deployment of North Korean troops to the region, they need to ensure that they do not inadvertently acquire combatant status. Of course, whether our personnel are combatants or not, there are clear risks. Since the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Russia has deepened its military ties with North Korea. According to reports, the US Air Force has upgraded the electronic warfare capabilities of the F-16 fighter jets that Ukraine purchased from its Western partners. The Air Force collaborated with Denmark and Norway to reprogram the electronic warfare systems on F-16 supplied to Ukraine by those countries and the Netherlands. The US military had previously denied contributing electronic warfare expertise to Ukraine's F-16s. The 350th Spectral Warfare Wing, the Air Force's premier electronic warfare unit, explained in a press release that they are constantly engaged in electronic warfare throughout the war, employing techniques such as jamming and deception to gain spectrum superiority. Ukraine's first F-16s were delivered by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, ending a long wait for Western fighter jets. Kiev states that it needs them to protect its airspace from Russia. The work led by the 68th Electronic Warfare Squadron required great adaptability, as the US system was tested in a partner country's laboratory with coalition teammates. According to the announcement, the goal was to test and validate the unique elements of their F-16s needed by the Ukrainians. The director of the 68th Electronic Warfare Squadron explained that this is not our standard operating procedure. It's unprecedented for the team to figure out the system in 2 weeks, enter the country with a partner, and develop the best mission data file ever. Thanks to the capability process. The process will be gradual. The US has indicated it will train a dozen Ukrainian pilots with the Arizona Air National Guard by the end of the fiscal year. Some of those pilots have graduated from that training, but the military declined to provide specific numbers, citing operational security. The jets on display are reportedly fitted with AIM-120 AMRAAM radar-guided medium-range air-to-air missiles and infrared short-range air-to-air missiles or ineffective training versions of them. The F-16s that Ukraine received alone will not ensure air dominance, but they can provide instant air superiority to achieve strategically significant targets and impacts. In addition to all this, a report by expert analysts has garnered significant attention. Russian leader Vladimir Putin is not interested in ending the Russian-Ukrainian war through negotiations and aims to eliminate Ukraine's statehood. The report states that Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to express that he is not interested in Ukraine's statehood and sovereignty. Analysts recalled that during a press conference with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Putin explicitly rejected any negotiated ceasefire, claiming that it would allow Ukraine to regroup and rearm. Analysts also believe that under the current circumstances, a ceasefire along the current front lines would benefit Russia by giving the Kremlin time to further radicalize and militarize Russian society against Ukraine.